Miss Zeglin here with Middle School Art Appreciation, and this is topic 14, 20th century art in Europe. And we are going to start out here looking at a Matisse painting. And Matisse here, he was playing around with a lot of shapes and colors. He's giving an illusion of flatness by making the wall red and the tablecloth red. Okay, so out this window, you're seeing a lot of these blues and greens. And here's something to remember: warm colors like reds, oranges, yellows go forward, whereas blues, cool greens, and blues are going to recede. So here he's really playing around with the space. And to me, this does look 3D, but yet this looks flat. And he's playing around a lot with these shapes, which gives his paintings a distinct look. And the thing, when we're talking about the 20th century art in Europe, let's first talk about the first half. So that would be from 1900 to 1950. And the text here is saying there were rapid changes in technology. Well, photography became widespread, world politics, two world wars, World War One, World War Two, and cultures changed. Okay, so with photography, artists are freed. They no longer have to really record history. Now they can really express themselves more, and they had a lot to express. The world wars changed history, and a lot of artists became disillusioned with life. The wars were so horrible. I know the death toll of World War II was 50 million people, not to mention, the destruction of Europe and a lot of other things, but it really changed everything. Okay, so first we're going to talk about Fauvism, and the Fauves in French were called wild beast, okay, which was not a nice name at the time. People were so outraged when they saw this art with these really bold, intense colors that the art critics were horrified. So, what happens is the artists exhibit their work, and the leader of the Fauves was Matisse, okay, who created the painting at the top. And and then the critics look at the work, and people come in to look at the work, and they say exactly what they feel, and they hated this type of art. They really did. Okay, so here's another work of art, um, using all these different colors, and the colors are not just really bright, they're just very intense, okay? Almost like they're used straight out of the tube. In painting and in art, when you add white to a color, you're tinting it. When you add black, you're creating a shade. These paints really look like they have just come straight out of a tube. They're not diluted, which gives it that intense look. Okay, then we're going to move on to Expressionism. And this is expressing, the fear and anger before World War One. The problems were happening. Economic problems. People were starving. There was tension in Europe. So here we have Edvard Munch's The Scream. Okay, and this is 1893. But the feeling really carries into the early 20th century. And Munch was a Norwegian artist, and actually some of his paintings were just stolen a few years ago, but really they just reflect what was going on at the time, how people were feeling, and just these colors. What colors does this what kind of mood does this evoke? A lot of anxiety. This angle of the bridge, these people coming, and just this creepy figure just silently screaming. Very anxious type of painting. Um, We have this street Berlin, and this was 1913. Okay, so a year before World War I started. You have these really good looking people, but this isn't a realistic composition. Their feet are slanted in an odd angle. It kind of throws you off. And the colors, you have those cool pinks and reds. But the people, and it says here, their faces look like masks and their gestures are stiff. This is not a natural um, type of layout. Okay. And then we are going to go down to Franz Marc Stables. Now we are starting to get more abstract here. I can see a figure of a horse here, but this was in 1913, and an abstraction is taking something and breaking it up into shapes and colors, and this is happening a lot more than is happening in these other paintings. Okay, but that's considered expressionism with the emotion and the kind of feeling it brings on. Okay, now we are going to move on to Cubism, extremely big break in art. Okay, now we are going from shapes in nature that are based on geographic forms, but they are going to look very different. And we have one of the world's most famous artists, Pablo Picasso, okay, a Spanish artist. He was influenced by African masks. This is an early Picasso, 1912. And you can see there's a rope frame, but he's taking things and breaking them up into the most basic shapes, okay, as is Brock, okay, who was working, at the same time. This is 1914, and we have similar subject matter here. Obviously, we have this JOH, but their style is very, very similar, okay. Gluing things onto a canvas and just flattening 3D shapes, to look like they are like 2D. Non-objective art, and by the way, Picasso had many, many styles, but he started out with Cubism and moved on from there. Non-objective is a huge, huge deviation from art. This is when there is no recognizable subject matter, okay? Which was really shocking, okay? It's almost like, and you hear people say this if you're in a museum, like, oh, I can do that. That's just scribbles on a canvas. These people did it first, okay? It didn't really exist before artists like, Can Kandinsky and Mondrian, who did this non-objective art, okay? And let's just take a quick look. Here's the Kandinsky, all these different shapes and colors. And let's see what year. This was 1914. Totally shocking. Uh, we have this composition here, just basically primary shapes, colors. Well, we do have some secondary colors, the orange and the green here, and then we have black, but just really, really different looking artwork, okay, from what people were used to seeing. Then things get stranger. We have Dada, surrealism, fantasy, and futurism. And again, these are reflecting the confusion of the things going on in the world. Surrealism deals a lot with death and decay. Okay, it's not, again, happy scenes of mothers and children or people at parties. You know, this is the persistence of memory, and this is Salvador Dali, arguably his most famous work, and a lot of people call it the soft clocks. So this is at the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA in New York. But when you look at this, they say that Dali is saying, well, he will survive through this artwork, that he can change time and, survive. Like he can bend time and last, whereas, maybe the rest of us are mortal. And maybe you think something a little bit different. That's fine, you know. But artists were disillusioned. The wars changed. They said the First World War would be the war to end all wars. It obviously wasn't by any stretch of the imagination. In the 20th century, there were amazing discoveries made, but it also was a very horrific century, with all the other wars and the atrocities, but through all that, these amazing artworks and sculptures were made. So we have Duchamp here, his bicycle wheel. Again, I can't even really convey how shocking this sculpture was to people. People were insulted and, saying, like, that's not art. Like, who do these people think they are? Miro, again, with the shapes. This is at MoMA. Paul Klee. And he was influenced, I believe, by Aboriginal images from Australia and different places. But making these creatures, and then we're gonna have the futurist, okay, rejecting the art of the past, going on to new things. Okay, and even this painting from 1912, you can see the movement of this little dog, and these feet are moving. A new way of looking at things, this dog, when it's moving, does look like it has many feet. Okay, the leash, we're not just seeing one perspective of the leash, but four. It's really showing us movement. Okay, and then just a couple of questions. Why do you think the Fauves were called the wild beast? And that was not a complimentary, um, name for them at the time. And it later became, what they liked to be called by, but it was an insult at first. Two, what culture influenced the Cubists to simplify and rearrange shape and form to increase the expressive qualities of a work? And remember, artists do not typically work in a cave or a bubble. They are influenced by other artists and other cultures and what is going on in the world, the events of the world. Why did Kandinsky believe that art did not need to represent real figures and objects? What do you think? Art at this point is becoming totally different, almost unrecognizable to art of the previous centuries. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for listening.